Hi, this is Melissa Jenkins with the U.S. Forest Service, and today I'm here to talk about the 2019 Mass Timber University Grant Program. I'll be talking about the background, requirements, and specifications of an application. So the purpose of today's webcast is to go over the request for proposals and to answer questions. And on the phone with me is Michael Gergen from the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities.
Hello everybody, this is Michael. I'm the Vice President for Innovation at the Endowment. We work on a number of different programs and we're administering this one for the Forest Service. I look forward to talking with you today and answering any questions you might have.
Thanks. So we'll just pop right into the meat of the request for proposals. So a bit on the background of this grant program. Our goal is to showcase the architectural and commercial viability of mass timber to maintain the health and resiliency of the nation's forests, support employment opportunities in rural America, and advance sustainability of the built environment. Mass timber products present an opportunity to build markets for materials from overstocked forests, and a thriving mass timber market has the potential to help reduce wildfire. We're trying to get more mass timber projects out there to help increase familiarity with code officials, with developers, with investors, and the design and construction community about the viability of these products and their ability to help with current forest health issues. Our intent for this grant program is to inspire interest and support for mass timber products among these communities by showcasing them at institutions of higher education. Funds can be used to support incremental activities that are your institutional hurdle for a new building project on your campus or a retrofit building project on your campus. We have 3 goals for this grant program. The first is to support institutions of higher education to break through those barriers related to designing and constructing a cost-competitive, code-compliant mass timber project. The second goal is to showcase the viability, application, repeatability, and sustainability of mass timber construction across the U.S. And finally, we want to clearly illustrate the direct link between the use of mass timber and the health and resiliency of our nation's forests and the economic development opportunities in rural communities. So our timeline is March 19th. We announced the request for proposals. May 31 is the submission deadline, and I'll go over a little bit later about who to submit the proposal to. And we're hoping to announce the awards, the winners, August 1st. So talking through some overall requirements, the available funding we have is up to $1 million, and most awards won't exceed $100,000. Now the matching for this award is applicants need to contribute an equal amount of money requested from this grant program. So for every $1 of funds requested, you need to supply $1 of match. So if you apply for $100,000, you need to provide $100,000 in match. And as a reminder, the match cannot be federal funding or federal salary, other federal funding. Eligible applicants are institutions of higher education and their design and construction partners. So the person that submits the application, it doesn't necessarily have to be that institution. It could be the design partner, the architect or engineer, or their construction partners. And eligible materials are cross-laminated timber, nail-laminated timber, glue-laminated timber, dowel-laminated timber, mass plywood, and other mass timber products. If they're in question, just reach out to Michael or me, and we can let you know if this is an approved material. Also, hybrid building solutions are eligible for this funding. So we'll be giving preference to proposals that are able to turn their funded activity into a case study, or for those institutions that have plans to construct their building within the next 18 months. So if your institution can complete either of these two things, make sure to highlight that within your proposal. So what are the eligible incremental activities that you can apply for? Well, we are asking you to tell us what your hurdle is at your institution. So there's a wide variety of activities that could be funded. I put up some examples, and there are some examples in the request for proposal. Any type of architectural work or engineering design. Perhaps you need some help with code review, or to set up meetings with code officials, or education of code officials to bring those officials to a jurisdiction that already has a mass timber building, if that's what's going to get you over that hurdle for your approval process. Or if you need some support for a cost study, or if you're looking to do a project life cycle assessment that will help you with decision making at that institution. And just a note, for cost studies, we really want to see the contractor that you work with have prior experience with mass timber projects, if that's what you're applying for funding for. And we want to ensure that you get estimates from more than one source. So we're asking for at least 3 potential mass timber suppliers. So I'll hand it over to Michael to go through reporting requirements.
Michael?
Whoops, I apologize to everyone. I was trying to keep things quiet and had you on mute. Thank you, Melissa. What we're trying to do with our reporting here is, if you're selected for a grant, we're looking for annual progress reports, which are fairly traditional, and we have some examples of those reports that we can share with you. As you submit quarterly invoices, we're looking for a financial report that showcases what you spent that quarter, and then of course a written progress sort of giving us an understanding of what those funds were used for during that quarter as well. At the end of the project, we're going to be looking for a detailed final report. And then finally, we will hold 10% of awarded funds until we get an acceptable final report, just so you're aware that that additional 10% will not be awarded until the very end of the project. Thanks.
Thanks. So I think I'll pause there just to see if there's any questions on these overall requirements before we get into the application part.
We do have a question from Mark. His question is, timing of current planning is very critical. We have a new building approved and $3 million allocated to begin the planning of the building. My university is very interested in mass timber options and would like to see a cost comparison. However, the contractor, architect, engineering firm has not been hired. It will be about a month after the deadline of this RFP. The details are sparse and will be left to the firm. Question is, can he sign up with the firm after the deadline, or hire a third party to conduct the cost comparison?
So this is Melissa. So if you're asking for funding for a cost analysis and the timing is not ideal, you know, I think that we might have to talk in detail about that one offline. I don't have a simple answer to give you right now. Michael, I don't know if you have something that pops ahead that we can share with everyone, or if this is something we can take offline.
Well, no, I don't have anything right at the moment, Melissa, but I think what would be useful is if there are unique circumstances like this, you know, we're certainly not going to bend the rules. The rules are the rules, but we're more than willing to talk with you about how we can accommodate you within the context of the overall program. So I do think that a one-on-one conversation, perhaps after today's webinar at some point in time, we can set that up with Melissa and myself, and we can get into details with any individual that's got those kinds of questions. The other thing that I would offer is that We will have a resource for you in the organization of Woodworks, and Melissa and I will provide a little bit of information about that as well. But Woodworks can be a partner in some of these opportunities, so that's something to consider as well, and we can think about how that might fit into the overall project that you've got. So even if your deadline, if your timeline doesn't meet our deadlines, I think you've got a couple of folks here that are more than willing to work with you and try to make something happen if it fits with the overall program.
Okay, perfect. And I'm seeing Mark's comment that, yes, we can set up a time to talk. And I do think that for many of these questions that we might have coming through, they might be a little bit individualized, so we're very happy afterwards to have some conversations. So I will, not seeing any other questions, I will move on to the application information. So this year, so this is the first time we're doing this Mass Timber University Grant Program, and we have a 5-page maximum per proposal for Part 1 of the application, which does not include the cooperator contact information page. It does not include letters of support, and it does not include any appendices. So the first part is basic project information that includes your title, project length, and an abstract. Next, we're asking for project goals and objectives that include the statement of need, what your goals and objectives are, and then how your proposed project responds to the goals of the grant program. Next, we're looking for information on your building project, so including information, site information, the financing plan and source of funding, how local authorities have been working with you up to this point, and any experience working with that local authority, and a statement that non-proprietary information for this project will be available and communicated to the public. One of the goals of this program is to disseminate information to others that are looking to get into mass timber. So rather than reinventing the wheel, using the lessons learned from your project. We'll have a budget component of the application where you'll describe how funds will be used to help resolve that hurdle at your institution. You'll include a timeline for completion of the funded grant activity, and also a timeline for that of your actual building. And then a note that you have to submit letters of support from any third-party organizations confirming the amount of match that you have. We'll want you to describe the impact your project will have on the larger national architectural and educational scale. So we want to see how accessible your project will be, how visible your project will be, and how your school will be used as an educational tool. We really want these buildings at these institutions to be an educational moment for others in the nation. And we want to learn how your project will help advance the broader mass timber market. We want to hear about the institutional readiness. So why is your institution a prime candidate for a mass timber building, or a second mass timber building, or a third mass timber building if that's where you guys are at? We want to hear about any sustainability commitments made by the institution and how this specific project can help satisfy those commitments. And we're curious, are there any institutional partnership agreements that will help facilitate completion of your mass timber building? We want to hear about the qualifications of your team and partners. So listing everybody that's part of your team, describing experience and success working with either the jurisdiction or working on similar projects, mass timber projects. And also we want to hear about the capabilities and certifications and experience on other mass timber projects. We want to see that your team can demonstrate that you will be successful in this next project. So I mentioned as part of the application, we want to see letters of support. And so we are requiring these from each entity that's on your team. So when you outline who is on your team, we want to see a letter of support from each person. We want to see a letter of support from the title holder from the property site, from the institution's chief executive and the head of capital projects. And in that letter from the institution, we want to hear clear intent for the building. We want to hear that institutional funding is available or what those fundraising goals that are left to accomplish are. And we want to hear from that head of the institution how that building will benefit the institution. We want to make sure that the schools that we choose are ready and willing to have a mass timber building on their campus. We're requiring a letter of support from the local authority that's going to be cooperating with the team, and also all of those entities that will be providing match. So some optional letters of support are from other partners, individuals, or other organizations that are playing a key role in your project. And these letters of support should display the degree of collaboration occurring between these different pieces. And then you're welcome to attach different appendices, and so some of them could be CVs from your team members. It could be engineering designs or different schematics for the actual buildings. If you're referring to different types of reports within your application, you can attach executive summaries. We'd prefer not to have 100-page reports attached to the application, so if you can keep it just to those executive summaries, that would be helpful. And then if there are more than 2 separate appendices, please include a table of contents to make it easy for our review and evaluation panel to go through them. So our evaluation criteria are broken down into 4 sections, each with 25 points. So project goals, objectives, and budget will receive 25 points total. Project and market impact, 25 points. Institutional readiness, 25 points. And qualification of team and partner, 25 points, for a total potential score of 100 points. And I'll turn it over to Michael for some details about the indirect cost rate and budgeting.
Yes, thanks, Melissa. The indirect cost rate is always an interesting question for your institutions. There are 3 approaches that we have with this particular grant and the rules that we are confronted with to administer it. So if you are a land-grant university, there are specific rules in place that you are not eligible to receive indirect cost rate recovery. If you're a land-grant institution, you just cannot get that indirect cost. I can explain that in detail to anyone who has questions on it, and there are some legal language that we can share with you on that front. If you are awarded a grant and you are not a land-grant university and you have a federally negotiated indirect cost recovery rate, the endowment will honor that rate. So that's a fairly straightforward process. If you're unaware of it, most of your institutions will have an ICR that's been approved by any federal agency. All you need to do is show us that letter, and we should be able to move that forward. Finally, if a subrecipient doesn't have that indirect cost recovery rate negotiated, the endowment can have a 10% de minimis ICR as requested by that subrecipient. Thanks, Melissa.
Well, thanks, Michael. So one of the most important questions is how to submit. And so you can submit your final application to Michael at michael@usendowment.org. And be sure to submit by 5 p.m. on May 31st. And we're looking for 1 PDF file for all the pieces of information. So that first cooperator contact information page, your 5-page narrative, letters of support, and appendices, all in one PDF file. And so I know there's going to be a lot of questions that are very specific to your institution. So for questions after the webinar, feel free to reach out to me or Michael, and our contact information is up on this slide. And we'll have the recording of this webinar also up on the Endowment's website. So now I want to open it up for questions.
Okay, we've got another question from Mark. He asks, can contributions from a partnership with Woodworks be considered as a part of the in-kind contribution?
That's a good question. I think I'll have to ask our grants and agreements person to double check that. My gut is to say sure, but I'll have to double check that, Mark. And when we talk offline, I'll have an answer for you.
Okay. Our next question is from Tom. He asks, if the university is the title holder and grant applicant, would the land manager be the title holder, or is that letter required?
I think if you can tell us that the university is the title holder, just include that in the letter from the head of the institution.
Okay. We have another question from another Mark. What is the indirect cost rate? Is it the grant itself?
The indirect cost rate is what an institution would charge simply. Most universities are looking to recover costs associated with their administrative functions. So office work, photocopying, all those pieces tend to get folded into an indirect cost recovery rate that most institutions have. So a lot of times those institutions will ask for that indirect cost recovery as part of the grant. In this case, if you were not a land grant university, because remember that's a zero ICR, that rate would be actually taken out of the $100,000 grant that might be awarded to you. So definitely factor that into your thinking as you move forward if you are eligible for that ICR. A lot of institutions want to make that recovery. Sometimes we found that if you work with your administration, there are ways to avoid that or take perhaps the 10% de minimis ICR to increase the overall impact of the grant.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michael. If you have any questions, make sure to type them in the chat and we'll get to them. Okay, we have a question from Kristen. They ask, if working on code issues and trying to develop new projects require If working on code issues and trying to develop new projects, the required letters of support could be a real challenge to come by for this RFP. Will proposals be considered if they do not have all required LOS, so letters of support?
Hey, Kristen. That's a great question. I think what we're trying to do is just ensure that that contact has been made with with those code officials. And so if your proposal, if the funding you're after is to work through those code issues, I think we're going to have a level of understanding there that maybe that relationship isn't as strong as it needs to be because that's what you're applying for funding for. So if you have, as you're working through this, if you're not able to get that letter, just reach out, just give us a FYI and heads up. This is our first time going through this grant program, so we're learning as we go, and if that's something that you can't get, let's just have a chat about that.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Candle. They ask, can a land grant institution include indirect costs as a part of the match?
You can include the costs that, yes, it's a little bit complicated, but that is certainly something that we've accepted in the past, is those indirect costs that are not recoverable can be used as matching dollars. Is that correct from your understanding, Melissa?
I believe so. We can double check that.
Okay. Mark is asking another question. He asked, do you expect the same grant opportunities to be offered in the next year?
We are not sure about that. That's a great question. Right now, we're not sure. In an ideal world, yes, but we are unclear beyond this year.
Keep your questions coming in the chat. Okay, we have a question from Tom. He asks, we are planning to identify all design costs that fit the grant criteria. If the value is over 100K, is including costs over 100K in proposal seen as a negative?
I think that if you do have something that's over our recommended amount of 100,000, that's okay. You can submit, and we can kind of see what happens. There's no guarantee that we will be able to do anything over that, and I wouldn't recommend going, to 500,000 or going way over, because that's a little bit unrealistic. But if it's something that's a bit over 100,000, I would say just go ahead and submit it, and we can see what we can do. We don't want the $100,000 to be a limitation for institutions. So if this is something that you think that you need to go a little bit over, I would say go ahead and submit what you see your needs to be, and when we go through the evaluation process, we will take a look at it.
Okay. Do we have any more questions for our speakers?
Well, if folks do have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We know that some of the questions are detailed, or folks are kind of just getting into diving into the application, but we're here.
And as you dive into that application, I'm certain that other questions will come up, and we certainly are available to try to answer those as best as we can, including working with other aspects of your universities that may not be familiar with some of the things like indirect cost recovery rate and some of those requirements. We're happy to have those conversations one-on-one with other members of your institution.
And one other thing I forgot to mention is we do have a frequently asked questions document up on the Endowment's website. And if we do get questions that we think others need to know about, we'll add to that FAQ document. And also within that frequently asked questions document, we do have some resources listed in there, such as Woodworks. And for folks that aren't familiar with Woodworks, they provide free project assistance for buildings with wood, including mass timber. So they have the U.S. divided out into regions, and they have a representative that is available to help with your design and architectural and engineering issues or questions. So they're a fantastic resource. The Forest Service provides funding to Woodworks, and it's a free resource for the country to use. So we highly encourage institutions to reach out to their woodworks representative.
Great. Well, we have another question from Mark, and he asked where exactly will we be able to find this presentation. This presentation will be posted on the U.S. Endowment's YouTube page, and it will also be on the U.S. Endowment website. So keep an eye out for that, and we will try to notify you once it's available. Well, if there are no more final questions, then I'd like to thank Melissa and Michael for this wonderful presentation. And I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time today.
Yes, thank you so much.